Hey YouTube, I want to knock this out as quick as I can. I've been studying a lot about what's going on with these statues. Back on December 9th, this leopard right here was placed in front of the United Nations building in New York City, and these pictures are in front of Rockefeller Center. So when this first came out, there were a lot of posts that came out about it. This particular one has 292 shares, and I wanted to share a couple things here. The verses that are directly related are Revelation 13:2. The beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Also here, Daniel chapter 7:2-4 describes the beast with the body of a lion and wings of an eagle. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and the four great beasts came up out of the sea. Remember that. Diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So these verses describe beasts that are very similar to what we're seeing here. And I don't claim to have an interpretation on what these exactly mean, but as I studied this last night, I found a lot of really interesting things. In Daniel 7:3, in Daniel 7:3, it says, four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. In Revelation 13, it says, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of blasphemy. So what I started to consider was this these beasts coming up out of the sea, and I looked up something that I have never heard of before. Manhattan. So if you look here, this is the east side of Manhattan, and the United Nations building is where the Jaguar was first placed. And you see how there's this straight edge, right? FDR Drive, and the United Nations building is here with the park, and I believe the Jaguar was placed somewhere over in this area. And what is very interesting to me is that this area used to be a bay. Turtle Bay is, let me move my thing here a little bit. Turtle Bay, Manhattan. It extends roughly 43rd to 53rd Street, and when you go back into the history of it, I'll put links for this. It used to be a bay. I've actually got a map of what it looked like in 1776. So if you look here, this entire section, where to go? So Turtle Bay, right here. Turtle Bay, this is where the United Nations building has been built. And it even says so in the Turtle Bay article. Look at this. So it talks about after the United Nations headquarters expansion plan was originally announced in 2000. So this is built on Turtle Bay. The United Nations is built on Turtle Bay. And when you read through the history of it here, what happened was this land was owned by a certain farmer, and the person wasn't able to pay the loan on the land, and the Rockefellers bought it. This land that the United Nations is built on used to be a bay right here on the east side of Manhattan. This is between about 43rd and 48th Street if you want to look at a map. So look at this. Construction slowly slowed during the Civil War but resumed again in the late 1800s. By then, the street building in the area had caused the Little Turtle Creek to back up, and the surrounding land became swampy and the water unhealthy. The bay was filled in, and an underground drainage system was built, emptying into the East River at about 49th Street. Soon the new landfill, the grounds where the United Nations now stands, became an industrial site. So this is the history of Turtle Bay. It literally tells you that this is where the United Nations was built. It used to be water. Now the beast is where that water used to be. Here's another thing that I wanted to detail about the Rockefeller part. Still, the factories and slaughterhouses remained on the landfill of the banks of the East River well into the 1940s, but that changed suddenly in December 1946 when John D. Rockefeller Jr. purchased 6 blocks of river frontage and donated it to the newly formed United Nations for its headquarters complex. So, 1947 is when they declared that Israel would become a nation. In 1948 in May, Israel became a nation in a day. So this was all right before Israel became a nation. And the Jaguar, I believe it was placed over here. This is on the north part by the park. And that part, as far as I understand, was underwater prior to this. Yeah, so here's the United Nations building. I believe it was on this north side, and they say that the bay was between like 43rd and 48th. So 43rd is right here, and 48th is this one up here. So this entire thing was underwater. And yet the beasts they put, I believe, right over here. Correct me if I'm wrong. If it was over here on this side, I don't know. But either way, this entire complex used to be a bay from about this area around. So I find it very interesting that the UN, the land was owned by the Rockefellers, and then it was donated to the United Nations, and the United Nations is built on what used to be water. And the Jaguar first showed up at the United Nations building. So the beasts came up out of the sea, came up out of the river, came up out of the water. If Daniel or John had watched this on like some kind of time lapse and they were standing out in the river, they would see this water turned into land, and then the United Nations built on it with the statues on it. So I thought that was pretty curious. And right after the Jaguar was placed in front of the United Nations building, it was later moved to the Rockefeller building. And here you can see both of them in front of the Rockefeller building. This is Rockefeller Plaza. And here's the Jaguar that was originally at the UN, and then the Dragon. I looked into, the artists that made this stuff, and I didn't find any relevant things. But this is what really blew my mind. So the Rockefellers donated the land so that the United Nations would be built, and the United Nations, I don't remember the exact numbers, but something about built around the same time Israel became a nation, right? But I want you to pay attention to this. You have the Jaguar, you have the Dragon that match Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. And I want you to look at this guy back here. This guy is called Wisdom. So Wisdom is a sculpture that's on the front of the Rockefeller building, and it's made by this guy from Germany. An Art Deco icon, Wisdom famously looms over the entrance to the main building of Rockefeller Center and can be seen from Fifth Avenue, created by Lee Lowry, one of America's foremost architectural sculptors. It is an impressive and imposing focal point Wisdom is considered the creative power of the universe, and the figure's commanding slant, intimidating expression, and biblical quote help convey his strength, impact, and control over man. So when, these look like King James kind of words, but it's not a quote that I'm familiar with. So I looked this up, and I found it in, so Isaiah 33. I'm going to move this over so you can see it here. Look at this. Isaiah 33:6. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times. Wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, right? In strength of salvation, the fear of the Lord is his treasure. Now this is what blew my mind. Behold, their valiant ones shall cry without, the ambassadors of peace shall weep bitterly. Okay, let's go to the old Google. Ambassadors of peace. I've already got it here because I typed it last night. Look at ambassadors of peace. It's all United Nations. Look, United Nations Goodwill, Ambassadors for Peace. Launched in 2001, Ambassadors for Peace is the largest and most diverse network of peace leaders. It's all the United Nations. United Nations Messengers of Peace, United Nations. So when Twitter first shared the tweet about this thing, it's from the United Nations photo. A guardian for international peace and security sits on the visitors plaza outside the UN headquarters. The guardian is a fusion of jaguar and eagle donated by the government of Oaxaca, I guess, Mexico. It is created by artist Jacobo y Maria Angeles. So this thing is named the Guardian of Peace and Security. And everybody knows 1 Thessalonians 5:3. For when they shall say peace and safety, peace and security, when you look at safety, it's also security. If you look there next to where it says G804, security, so peace and safety, peace and security, it's the same word. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Look at this. Behold, their valiant ones shall cry without, the ambassadors of peace shall weep bitterly. And wisdom is right behind the pictures of the dragon and the jaguar. Like, of all the places they could have put this, it's got Rockefellers and United Nations all over it. And like, I don't even know if they're doing this, but they're tying it back to their own destruction. They will say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child. The ambassadors of peace will weep bitterly. So let me see what else that I can throw in here and add to this before I wrap it up.
And the whole agenda is to create a one world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish.